Good morning everybody, welcome back. Very wet today. I hope all of those of you who are up here in the mid-north coast are relatively high and dry in your sheds. Okay, so it's a good day to be in the shed again. It's quite wet, everything's happening here. So anyway, we're running a little behind today, so we're going to have to wing it a little bit. Standing around doing nothing half the day and then everything catches up straight away. So we'll see how we go. All right, so just to reiterate where we were last week. Got to the point where we glued in our shelf in our cabinet. The cabinet's all done. The back's all on it, so I've got all of that fitted and nice. And then we've got this, we've just got our little, excuse me, our little little piece in the front there. That's just a little feature piece. Okay, so we've got that in. It's all, as you can see, it's not very thick. Once I planed the top off it and did that, a bit of sanding, okay, so just a light sand just to get it nice and smooth, and that's how we ended up. Then, when I did that, when we got that sorted, what I did then was, and I made this up, I sort of spent a little bit of time preparing all of this so that I can sort of flow through the processes that we do from there on. We were making the door frames. So the door frames were made from pieces of material like this. They were only 40 mil wide, and these ones here are 13 mil, or just over 13 millimeters thick, which is adequate for the door because it's only a lightweight door that we're going to be using. And then the other thing that I did to it was I cut the trench in the bottom of it. Now that trench is to put a surround around the outside edge of the door. And how I'm going to do that, I'm just going to show you how I did that. I'm going to build these two pieces. I'm going to glue this together. Now, when we glue this together, what you'll do is you'll find that we've got to leave it for a little while to dry, so we can't work on with that. So I prepared some other stuff earlier. I prepared some stuff so that what we're going to be doing is we're going to just go and progress through the functions of each of the things that we do. So this one here, I did that last week. Okay, so we've got our rebate in there. This week what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tongue on both sides of a piece of cedar. Okay, that will be, this will be the outside of the frame. So I'll put a tongue on either side of that, show you how to do it, and then I will glue those two pieces together, and basically we'll end up with a wide board like that. Now the important thing to remember is that when you start this, you must make sure that your pieces of timber are perfectly parallel. Okay, you can't just use a rough piece of timber with a rough outside edge. It's got to be perfectly parallel. So trim it up and make it really nice before you even start. The same applies to the piece that goes in the middle. This one here, it doesn't matter how wide that is, so long as when you cut it down the middle, we're going to do that on the bandsaw. You cut it down the middle, you're actually going to get enough material there to give you the correct width of your bead around the outside. So that's what we're going to do. Now I've got a test piece here as well, so that's my little test piece, and we'll take that from there. Okay, setup. So now I just want to set up. We're using our tenon cutter. Set that up in the router. Spanner. Make sure that's nice and tight. Now the height that we set the tenon cutter at, has to be the thickness of one edge. Okay, so it's up the height of that. So when I set the height of the router bit, so. It's pretty easy to set it. I could measure it if I like, but I don't really need to. I can use. Just got to get it down a little bit, like so. Now, the other important thing to remember is that these two pieces of timber need to be the same thickness. You need to make sure that you've got them the right thickness. If you don't, you'll find that even if you do take that much off there, because if that's a little bit thicker than it should be, you're still going to be too thick in the middle here, and you have to readjust your route a bit. Okay, so make sure that they are all exactly the same thickness. This is my test piece, by the way. Now, I was going to set up my dust extractor for this exercise, but it's such a small exercise, I'm not going to do that. Now, as you can see here, there's not a lot of router bits exposed. It's covered up by my fence. Now, the depth that you need to do, as you can see, this is exactly 10 millimetres deep. So I've cut that trench to 10 millimetres. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my tenon, or cut the tongue, to 9 mil. That will give me a little bit of space in the back here for expansion, so I'll allow things to move around a little bit. Okay, clamp that down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide that along here, and again, this is my test piece. So, need earmuffs. So ears on, everybody. So there's my first cut. I'm just going to test that to see if that's looking like it might fit. Yep, I think we're pretty right. If anything, it'll be a bit too thin, but that's okay. And so now you can see we've got a pretty good fit. Okay, if anything, it's a little bit loose, which means I could drop it down a tiny little bit, and we'll join that together. Yeah, as you can see, there's a little bit of a gap right up close inside there, and that's what we want. Okay, so I'm going to just readjust a tiny little bit. Take less off, so I'm just going to drop it down a tiny bit, and I'm going to retest on the other side. Wasn't quite happy with that one, so I'll give it another go. Okay, so now you can see it's a little bit more snug, a little bit tighter. So I just adjusted that a tiny little bit, and you can see when we squeeze that together, the whole thing just pops in. We've got a nice clean join, okay, along there. And then when you look at it, you can see I've got my little gap in here. Okay, that'll allow for expansion. The other side was just a tiny little bit too loose. So now go ahead and cut my real bit. Done all my testing. So ears on, everybody. Okay, as you can see, that fits quite nicely. So all we need to do now is glue that. So I'll just get my gluing stuff together. Take 2 seconds to get that sorted. Okay, so I always put a platform down for gluing. Piece of offcut. A little bit of glue. Don't need a lot. I prefer to sort of, and this is the glue that we use. I like to use a Type Bond 3, particularly with this sort of thing. A little brush. Piece of that. And this one will probably only need one clamp on it. We'll see how it looks when I'm finished. So just spread your glue along. Try not to put too much on. You don't want to overdo it because as you saw, it's a relatively tight fit. You don't want it too tight because then it splays the trench that you've done. To the other side. It's just a matter of feeding that in. Oop. So as you can see, I can squeeze it in with my hands. It's not that tight. So now it's just a matter of squeezing it in with a clamp. The other end. Put another clamp on it. Might just clamp the end of it. Okay. So wipe off our excess, and as you can see, there's not a lot of excess on there, not a lot of squeeze out. Do the other side. You can see that has folded it up a little bit. This is what you need to be careful of as well. You'll see that if you have a look at the edges here, you've got really nice clean joins there. And because I've got clamps on both sides, what it's done is cupped it, it's pulled it in odd. So if I just turn that over, you can see on the other side, you can see the gap on this side here. Be very careful of that. So if we put the clamp on this side and pull it back, you can see it's closed up that gap considerably. I'll just give this one a bit of a squeeze on this side so that it's it pulls that in there nicely. Okay, so we're good there. It's pretty good on that side. So now I'll just set that aside to dry. Okay, so for this piece here, what I need to do now is I need to cut that down through the middle. Okay, so if I let that sit that aside to dry, one of the only times I leave a clamp on a piece of timber is when I've got that sort of thing. So I'll set that aside and dry, and then we'll go on with the next bit. So just put this aside. Now, through the magic of television, just to get rid of some of this stuff. I have one that I made earlier. Okay, so this is the one that I made. Like I said, I prepared things beforehand, and this is exactly the same thing, just a little bit longer, but exactly the same process. So what I'm going to do now is I'll cut that down through the middle with the bandsaw, and then I'll show you what I do from then on. Now, before I do that, while it's a large piece, it's much easier to manipulate it and to do things to it. So what I want around the outside of the frame is a 5mm piece of material. So you'll see I've got a couple of measurements here. So what I've done is I've marked the centre of my board here, and that's my edge. That's the edge that I'm going to keep. All right, so I'll cut it down through the middle, and then I'll plane off the excess that's left over. But before I do that, what I want to do is I want to mark that while it's in this solid piece here. I can do the marking a little easier. So I've set my marking gauge to that distance. If you look at the top and look at the point of the route, the marking gauge, I've got it set on that piece there. And what I can do then is just mark right through there. Turn it around and mark the other side. Okay, so that's given me my two marks. That's the pieces that I'm going to keep. So I'm going to pencil mark, put a pencil mark in that scribe. Gives me something to see if a little bit Okay, so now I'm just going to cut it down through the middle. So we just go over to the bandsaw. Okay. Now I've marked the centre, so I'll just set my, doesn't really matter if you're not in the centre at this anyway, because it's going to be waste. Just set the fence on my saw. Remember, make sure you've got a push stick, okay? Now, this is a piece of radiator that I found in the box, and I thought, oh, I'll put a little handle on it, so I turned up a handle for the end of it. So it makes it a dedicated tool, and then I've got my little 90 degree on the end of it. So, ears on everybody. Not exactly in the middle, but it's good enough for what we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit those like those, that, and then I'm going to plane the excess off. Okay, so I'll just come around to my vise. So that's going to get, by doing that I've got a mark on this side, and I've got a mark on that side, and so I can put that in there. Just make sure you've got them flush. Come down this way, come round to this side. And remember that little plane that I did up? I showed you this last week. This is the plane, and as you can see, it's lovely, shiny, clean. I've done a little bit more work to it. I did a bit more work on the blade. You can see the shavings that are coming off now. This plane was never any good, but now we've got lovely shavings, and you can see the surface is actually shiny. And I'm cutting a fair bit off too. I haven't got it set lightly because I want to get all the way down to that line very quickly. You see the shavings are actually the same width as the board, which is really nice. All the way along. So now down to the second board. I know I'm not down to the line because I had a little bit of excess. It's just a matter of planing down to the board, planing down to my line. Now that I've got the bulk of it away, I might just set my plane back a little bit. Don't want to take too much off. And as you can see, the shavings are a little bit lighter. Sound is nice too. You can hear it shushing along. A little bit off this end here. And that's pretty much it. And so now you can see I've got my nice little edge, and that will be the edge of the board. So a little bit more dressing and that'll be perfect. Okay, so back to the bench. Now, through the magic of television again, I've cut myself the actual door frame panels, pieces. So let me just get rid of some of this stuff and we'll see where we get to with the rest of it. No questions up there we need to answer, Pammy? Just want to remove all this stuff. Half the time, your time's taken up by setting up tools and then pulling them apart. Okay, so here we have it. Now, the process that I just showed you was to get the bead on the outside of the board. So when we set that up, what we're going to do is we're going to have this bead around the outside of the door. Okay, so once you get to that stage, it's now time to cut the mitres. Now, on a traditional door, the panels or the framework is generally mortise and tenon. And you'll see that the panel on the top overlaps the two side rails, so it'll be sitting up like that. That's generally the technique that's used for small doors like this. Now, we're not going to do that, because if I did that, the end of it would show the join, which we don't want to happen, okay? Or it would show on the top, whichever way you've got it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a mitre on there, and then we're going to butterfly the mitre. Okay, so that will lock the whole lot together, and we'll keep it that way. So, butterflies, or sorry, mitres. So there's our frame, and we'll just drop over to the, I'll just drop over to the drop saw, and we'll cut our mitres. Okay. Now, I generally use my jig, like so. I have to clamp that in place. Just want to make sure I get it right first. Now, we're going to cut the mitres from the back edge, which is the outside edge. Use my laser. I want to do it right on the corner. Might just make it sits. So what that's doing is sitting against the back of the board there. Don't want to go too far in. Just shift it a tiny bit. Just give myself something to work with at the end of it. Stopping that. So that stops on the board, and it gives me a millimetre or two there. Just come back a tiny bit. That'll give me a stopping point for all the boards. Like so. Lock it all down. It's moved, so I've got to readjust. Pretty much on it now. Always good to make sure that the jig is set up correctly first. There we have it. So, ears on everybody. Flip it over. Just make sure it touches where the other one touched. There it is. Same with these ones. For those of you who make picture frames and don't have a mitre press, this is always a good idea. This will always work. Okay, so back to my bench. So now I have my door frame. Just making sure everything fits up. It looks really nice. All my joints are pretty good. All I need to do now is to work out how I'm going to have that grain looking. So if I turn this one over, it brings a fair bit of colour into the front of the door. I've still got a bit of work to do on a couple of these bits, but maybe that should be about the colour I've got it. This one's got no colour on it whatsoever. So that can be the hinge side and this will be the lock side. So there's my door frame. So now what I need to do is cut my butterflies. So work out where the butterflies are. Now normally on the when I'm doing butterflies on my boxes, I have this little mini jig. Now the template on the mini jig is designed to take the H10 cutters. So you can imagine that the butterflies are quite small. When you look at one of the boxes, you'll see that the butterflies on this one are quite small. Now that size won't work on these. This is just a bit too big for that size butterfly. So what I have to do is I have to revert back to my a bigger jig. So if I get my A10 and use my A10, I can get myself a bigger butterfly. But I also need to use, instead of using the H10, I need to use the A10 dovetail bit. The H10 won't work well in here, so the idea is to use the bigger size. So that's what I'm going to do. It's going to do a bigger butterfly, which means that the distance from one side of the butterfly to the other on the top edge is going to be at least 10 millimetres. So I'll show you how to get that done. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark out where I want these, and then I'm going to cut them. The thing that you need to do if you have the butterfly jig, you need to put on our adjusted stop. You can see the stop has actually got a 45 degree on it. We need to have that on there to be able to hold the mitres properly. So we do have those for sale if you want to buy one, but they're not absolutely necessary, but it's a really good idea. So let me get the cabinet out of the way. Dropped it. Okay. Just need to set up around a bit. Okay. Now. Thank you. All right. Next step. Let's get that out of the way for a start. That. A couple of clamps. Now I don't know where this is going to go just yet, so I'll just put it on there to hold it in place for the moment. This one's going to sit on there. All right. Now I only need to mark one of these. So if I position that correctly, now where do I want my butterfly? You'll notice when I did my keepsake box, I had two butterflies. So I had one here and I had one there, and they were both different sizes. Bigger one on the outside, thinner on the inside. I'm not going to do that here. I don't think it's necessary. Remember, it is a workshop cabinet, and all I want to do is lock the joint together so it doesn't actually fall apart. So over a period of time, it's not going to fall about immediately, but over a period of time it may do. So where my butterfly goes, I'm pretty much going to put it in the middle, I think, and so about there. I've just basically guessed that. If I put the measurement on it, it's 60 millimetres across here, so 30 mil. So 30 millimetres. Now what I want to do is a square, just put a square line on there. Okay, so the butterfly's going to go through there. So when I look at that, I think, well, it's too far from the corner here, and once I get the butterfly in here, it's going to be too close and it's going to be very cluttered in the corner there. So what I might do is might bring it back a little bit. So let's come back, say 10 mil from that line. What I have to be careful of is I'm going to cut a rebate in here to put the inside of the panel in. I have to be very careful that I don't take out too much material. Let's try that again. this one will probably be pretty good. Okay, so I'm not going to use this mark. We'll just use one of these to do our adjusting. The next thing I need to do is I need to make sure what depth, how far do I want that butterfly to be, right? So about the same as this would look nice. So if I brought it up to about here and about there, and again, this is something that you can change depending on what you're trying to achieve with the cabinet. It doesn't have to be a set measurement. It's something that you sort of build into the design as you're working along with it. So if I did, let's say, a 20mm butterfly from the centre to here. What I need is a mark there so I can set the height for my route a bit. I'll put one on here as well. Okay, so that's my marking out. Now it looks a little bit complicated, but it's you'll see how it works. All right. Now set up height. This is how we set the height. So I set my centre mark to the centre. That's the other way. I'm just doing it by eye, and that's all we need to do. Again, these are flexible, these markings and measurings, so it doesn't really, unless you have a particular reason for putting it in a spot, like I say, they're just flexible markings. Okay, so that's sitting in there nicely. Clamp this on here. Okay, so there's my setup for the piece of timber, and it gets locked in with this clamp, like so. Okay, it's not going to go anywhere. When I want to do a change, I just take that clamp off, and I can just reverse it and put that one straight in there. If your timber is parallel, it's going to be a perfect fit every single time, right? So my first one's going to be here. I'm going to lock that in place. Now I have to set the height. Caught on the bottom of the jig. Remember, your maximum height for this is 13mm. So come down a little bit. The thing to be sure, or to make sure of, is that you are, come down a little bit more, that the bearing, there we go, make sure the bearing is running on your template. If you don't, you're going to cut away some of your template, and that's not going to look good. So we're basically ready to cut. Checking that. Pretty good. Okay, so ears on everybody. I've got 15 minutes, so I should be able to get all of these cut in 15 minutes. little piece of sandpaper. Looks nice, nicely on the back. So now it's just a matter of, we were there. Habit. Keep taking that off, I shouldn't have. Just got to make sure you're getting into the right Gary, cutting a rebate first, you can do that if you like. There's no special way or no special reason for doing it the way I do it. I just find it a much more simple way of doing things, and then I can adjust the trench depth according to what my butterfly is. Okay, so whichever way you do it, Gary, it'll always come out exactly right anyway. So that's it for the butterflies. We're pretty much going to, I'm just going to dress this up a little bit and just show you how it all fits together. Shift that out of the way. Sanding block and a little bit of 180. I don't want to overdo the sanding, just enough to take the furry bits off, and you'll get a little bit of a furry bit there because it's not cutting perfectly along the grain. cutting it along the grain. And remember, this now, the dovetail is now 90 degrees to this surface here, which is what you want it to do. So when you put it together, you've got your butterfly going across the corner like that. Okay, so that'll make it look really nice. Now, where I've got that positioned, it's going to look quite nice because it's fairly evenly positioned on the light piece of timber rather than the dark piece of timber. So it looks a little bit nicer than having it right up close to the dark. Now you must remember that most of the techniques that I'm showing you are all flexible. You can do them any which way you like. You can adjust them however you like. They're not something that's dyed in the wool set. I wouldn't actually call it traditional either. Basically because we're manipulating things as we go along. And as you might have noticed, I haven't actually got a plan set up aside. When I initially started the cabinet, I took the plans off the one that I'd already built over there. Now I didn't write up any plans for that either. All I did was sketched on my whiteboard. So as you can see, it's fairly flexible, and I've designed it to match the tools that I'm going to put in it. So that's the way that all works. So here we have again a flexible way of doing things. You don't need to always have a plan. You can make it up as you go along, and I tend to do quite a bit of that with some of my work. Okay. And some people think that's not the way to do things. Oh, that's okay, that's fine, that's the way they think. I just think that I like to do things to suit the purpose that I'm building it for, even if there isn't a plan for it. Because often you'll find that the plans are either if you're looking for plans and you go searching for plans, you'll find that they're either in inches and you've got to convert to metric and so forth. So I find that a little bit a hard task at the best of times. So now you can see where my butterflies are here, and you can see the result that I've got out of this. So there's my butterflies cut. Now cutting the butterflies is going to take a good hour or 3/4 of an hour by the time we trim up the material and do all that sort of stuff. So I'm not going to cut the butterflies today. All I've done is I've cut the rebates. As you can see, even with that dark shadow, that frame is starting to look really, really nice, and it hasn't got any bits in it yet. So the door is a little bigger than it needs to be, which is fine, because then I can trim the edges off it and no problem. I can tidy up all these little bits and pieces that you can see on the corner here. I can tidy up all of those before I actually fit the door. And what I need to do now is I need to work out which way face up my timber is going to be, where I'm going to have my hinges, and then I'm going to, if I can work out where all my hinges are and all of my hardware is going to go, I can work out what colour I want showing on the front of the door, whether I want lots of colour or not very much. That one's actually going to be at the top. So we can see that some of the grain actually fits together quite nicely, and the colour. Yeah, that looks pretty good like that. Okay, so now if you look at it now, you can see that my colour here matches, my colour here sort of matches, so it's a continuation around the thing. Where it doesn't match is this corner here, but then again, this is the side I'm going to have the hinges on, Okay, so there's no colour on that piece at all. Even when I turn it over, you can see that there's nothing there that actually stands out. So that one's going to fit into there. All right. So I think we'll call it quits there today. So what I'm going to do next week is I'm going to cut a rebate in there to fit my piece of perspex. Okay, so the piece of perspex is going to fit in the door like so. And I'm also going to round over the front edge of that to give it a little bit of character on the front, on the inside edge. So I'm going to do that as well next week. And those, we'll do the plastic, the perspex. We'll do that first and get that fitted. And then we'll make the butterflies, and I'll show you how to go about fitting those and putting it all together, because when we glue the whole lot together, we've got to have that ready to go in there. Okay, so there's those things have to be done as well, but yeah, it's coming along quite nicely. No, I don't think I have many things to do. Probably dress up a piece of material for the butterflies. I'll do that over the week, during the week, and I'll show you what I've done with that as well. So we take it from there. So hope you all stay dry. Flick over to Dave if you want to have a look and see what he's up to today, and I'll see you all next week.